What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Mets Central Podcast. And the Mets with a surprising, at least to me, a surprising series victory over the Chicago Cubs. They take 2 out of 3. The opposite of my prediction happened. I said they'd win game two, lose games 1 and 3. And thankfully, the opposite happened. Thankfully, they were able to take care of the Cubs, proving that they could beat a team over 500, which was absolutely huge for them. There were, some moments to highlight, of course. And game two, really winnable. Sucks that they wasted a performance from Brett Beatty, a rare quality performance from Brett Beatty. But yeah, we got a lot to get into in this episode, as well as talk about a trade rumor that has emerged out of nowhere in the middle of May, which is bizarre because you never hear about that really. But we got a lot to get into. And then on top, we have to preview the Pirates series that is coming up. Before we jump into everything, please be sure to leave a like if you do enjoy. Subscribe if you guys are new to the channel, especially if you're Met fans, and turn on your notifications so you know when we upload or go live here on Met Central. But how are we feeling after they take 2 out of 3 against the Chicago Cubs?
I definitely got to agree that it's definitely a bit of a surprising series, in my opinion, just because I remember when we talked about it on the previous podcast that we did, and we talked about the keys going to this Cup series, and we said that really, if the Mets want to win the series, the pitching has to be really good, or anywhere from above average to really good, and then also the bats have to really come and play and hit to the level of the Cubs, because obviously we know that the Cubs are one of the top offenses in baseball right now, and one of the also the deeper lineups in baseball. And I mean, pretty much apart from Saturday, like obviously because we'll get into the McGill start where he wasn't great, but pretty much when you look at the Friday game and yesterday's game, both Clay Holmes and Griffin Canning went out there. They pitched very well. They both went 6 innings, gave the Mets length, which is something that we talked about, which this starting rotation needs to do. They need to keep giving this team length, especially to keep the bullpen a bit fresh now, since the Mets bullpen has started to get a couple injuries over the past couple weeks. And then surprisingly, I mean, like you talked about on Saturday with the Brett Beatty performance with the 2-run home run game, which we'll talk about. The offense wasn't great. It wasn't great in that game on Saturday, especially with the top of the lineup. Both Lindor, Soto, and Pete having pretty rough games in that game. But when you look at the Friday game and the Sunday game, you really start to see both top of the lineup and both the bottom part of the lineup both really click, and you both saw 7 runs in the first game and then the 6 runs yesterday, respectively. So a good overall series. Like I talked about, the offense was a bit better. Still, though, you would like to see a little bit better in terms of bringing in guys or runners in scoring position. But it was a bit better this series. But yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah, which there's definitely a lot of things to take away here, especially with the offense, which is what you were talking about before, with the top of the order and everything, because there is a conversation to be had there. But let's recap the games here, and then we'll get into the bulk of the conversation here. So in the first game, it was Jameson Taillon versus Clay Holmes on the mound. And in the bottom of the first inning, Francisco Lindor would lead things off with a solo shot to make it a 1-0 ball game for the New York Mets. And then Brett Beatty in the bottom of the second, can you believe it? He ends up getting a home run of his own to make it 2-0. And then Jeff McNeil would make it 3-0 with a home run of his own in the same inning. Fast forward to the bottom of the third inning, the Mets get the bases loaded. Luis Angel Acuna would hit into a force out. A throwing error would allow 2 runs to come across the plate and make it 5-0 for the Mets. Kyle Tucker would respond, though, with a home run in the top of the fourth inning to make it a 5-1 game. And then Juan Soto would get a solo home run to make it 6-1, getting his third home run at Citi Field, his second straight series at Citi Field, getting a home run, which was nice to see. Hopefully, he's starting to get more comfortable in that regard. And then in the eighth inning, Juan Soto also had an RBI single, which made it a 7-1 game. And Jose Budo did not make it any easy, as he had to allow that home run there to Michael Busch, which made it 7-2, and the Mets would hold on to win by that final score. In game number two, it was Tylor Megill versus an opener, which the Cubs sent out Brad Keller as the opener in that game. And in the first inning, the Mets did not look good right away. Seiya Suzuki ended up getting a RBI single to make it 1-0 after Tylor Megill puts runners on base early. Dansby Swanson would end up hitting a single as well to make it 2-0. And then it would be 3-0 in the third inning as Suzuki got a leadoff double and Michael Busch would drive him in with an RBI single. In the fourth inning, Dansby Swanson would hit a solo shot, which made it 4-0. And right then and there, you had a feeling that they were probably done, but they end up responding right away as Pete Alonso and Mark Vientos would each get singles of their own. A wild pitch would advance them, and then Brett Baty, again, hitting a home run to make it a 4-3 ball game. And as we fast forward throughout this game, it unfortunately did not get easy as Max Kranick had a really rough outing, which is starting to become a little bit of the norm for him, unfortunately, which we're going to have to talk about, which he ends up loading up the bases, can't put out Amaya, who ends up getting a single to make it 6-3. Not a good spot for Max Kranick to leave his slider. But again, we'll talk about that. And then Brett Baty ended up getting a 2-run shot, which made it 6-5. So again, another home run from Brett Baty, and all of a sudden he's on fire. But he would sit the next game, as in game number 3 after the Mets lost 6-5 in that game. It would be Griffin Canning versus Matthew Boyd on the mound for the Cubs. And in that game, the Mets offense got going a little bit early as Marte would get hit by a pitch, and then Luis Torrens would hit a triple to make it a 1-0 game. And as we fast forward throughout this game, the Cubs would respond. PCA ends up getting a home run. It was obvious he was going to at some point the series, and it ended up being in the top of the 6th inning as it was very quiet. Very early on, a lot more of a pitcher's duel in that game. And then the 6th inning, Mark Vientos would hit a solo shot, which made it 2-1. Horner would respond with an RBI double to make it a 2-2 game. Francisco Lindor, though, would end up hitting a solo shot, which made it 3-2. Mark Vientos got an RBI single to drive in Pete Alonso to make it 4-2. And then Brandon Nimmo, with his first home run at Citi Field on the season, makes it a 6-2 game. And the Mets would hold on to win by that final score. So, yeah, definitely a lot of good to take away for the most part. Obviously, still some things that you'd like to see either improve or some things that are starting to look a little bit concerning. The two concerns that I would point to from the series, and again, even though they won, these are concerns that I have. Max Kranick's definitely one of my first concerns because he has not looked sharp recently at all in any of his outings. And then Pete Alonso, he's starting to come back down to earth, which is expected because of the start that he got off to. He wasn't going to sustain that. It's just unrealistic to ask for. The good news is the Mets are still winning despite Alonso regressing a little bit back to the mean, but it is nonetheless a little concerning that he has not been as productive as he was to start off the season.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm too concerned about Pete Alonso because, as you said, he's regressing to the mean. And look, I mean, he was pretty much playing at a 1,200, 1,300 OPS stretch from pretty much the start of the season till about, I would say about 1 or 2 weeks ago. So, I'm listening. At the end of the day, it's baseball. There's ebbs and flows in the season. Like there's going to be there's going to be long stretches where you're hot. There is going to be some stretches where you're going to cool off, and ultimately, it is expected. Now, look, if Pete, starts playing poorly now for about a month or 2 months, then yeah, we'll have a conversation. But as of right now, it's only been about a week or two, and for me, he still hasn't been like terrible, but it still has been a noticeable drop off since what he was doing at the start of the season. But look, like you said, the good thing is that they're winning games. Juan Soto has started to play it a bit better, even though he had a strong first game, but really the last 2 games weren't too strong for him. He did go a combined 0 for 9 in those last 2 games. So you would hope that starting this series against the Pirates, that he's going to go back into his form that we start to see over the past couple series. Francisco Lindor is obviously he keeps on doing what he's doing. Obviously, we saw him hit that big home run in the finale of the series to give the Mets a 3-2 lead and push them on towards a victory. Brandon Nimmo start to look a bit better. Mark Vientos as well. Yesterday had 2 big hits with the solo home run to put the Mets up 2-1, and then also with the RBI single yesterday to put the Mets up 4-2. So, and that's something that we talked about, especially with the last couple of podcasts, because we've been talking about where, the top guys in Lindor, Soto, Pete, they are going to, at least for the most part, get on base consistently, and they're going to give the Mets a big shot to win. However, it's down to the 4 or 5 guys, which we talked about in terms of Nimmo and Vientos. Those are the 2 guys that really need to step up because, really when we looked at, because, a lot of people, including us, were saying that the Mets had one of the top lineups in baseball going into the year. And a big part of the reason why we thought that is because, apart from those first 3 guys in the lineup, you have the 2 guys in Nimmo and Vientos that really create that really good depth right in the middle of the order. And those 2 guys, while the Mets were still winning earlier on the season, they were severely struggling. And we said, if we're going to look at, winning consistently and the types of baseball that this team was going to play consistently, in order for those wins to become more consistent, those 2 guys really have to step up. So at least for me, I like that those 2 guys are kind of starting to, feel a groove, and we're starting to see it in the way, they've been hitting for more power recently. They're hitting the ball in the air more. I think for me, I really like that we're starting to see Nimmo do that, and he's kind of changes his approach a little bit. Still, he's still kind of going up there being aggressive, but I think in the last couple of series, you really start to see him, take pitches, work more counts, hit for more power, hit the ball in the air. So that's something that that I've been like to see. And also with the fact that, Brett Beatty's now starting to get more playing time, I think, that could really, now thrive now, really work towards Vientos in his favor as more of, competition, because we've seen it in baseball and other sports, competition gets the best out of players. And I think if Brett Beatty's going to be there, and especially if he's going to keep playing well, and, considering that he hit 3 home runs in the series, if Mark Vientos now feels a little bit of pressure behind him with Brett Beatty, and now he feels that he has to, up his game a little bit, I think that's only better for him. And I think that's only going better, for the depth. And then also, we've seen Francisco Alvarez, even though he's not hitting for power, he is getting on base, he's getting on base. So that's also very good for me to see. But yeah, I mean, the only thing I will say with the offense, though, is, especially with the second game, we still need to see, better in terms of situational hitting and runners scoring position. And then overall, like you said, with the Max Kranick one, Kranick has definitely dropped off in terms of his production and his overall, pitching ability. I'm not too worried yet about Kranick. I think this is something that we saw, last year with other bullpen options, especially when we got towards the midway of the season. Because if you really look, Kranick has been used a lot this season, not only in terms of, just regular one pitch, 1 inning outings. He's been used a lot in multi-inning outings. And if you recall, to like what we saw with Reed Garrett last year in the season, really when we got towards the midway part of the season, because Garrett had been used so much, we really start to see a drop off in Garrett's performance. And it's part of the reason why, we've gotten on Mendoza for, why aren't we using Reed Garrett in this situation? Why isn't Diaz being used in this situation? I think he's trying to, be a bit more balanced in terms of how he uses the bullpen, because he doesn't want to burn those guys out. So I think in terms of Kranick, I think we might start to see a little bit less usage of him. And now, especially, with Stanek looking a bit better with his recent performances out of the bullpen, with Edwin Diaz starting to look like he's finding a bit of form. And then, like we talked about before, when, ultimately when guys like Minaya, when Montas comes back, and then you have the ability to either, switch guys like Canning or McGill or Peterson to the bullpen, and now you have Kranick in more of a 1 inning role. I think that will be ultimately better for Kranick. And then, we'll start to see him go back to what we saw in spring training at the start of the season, when he has a little bit of a less of a workload to deal with.
Yeah, and that's why I've been like the biggest proponent of having him be a 1 inning type of guy, because I just I get that he was a starter, but I also at the same time look at it as, well, there's a reason he's not starting anymore, because he's just not meant for that type of workload. And now it's to the point where, I mean, they're working him so much throughout these weeks where they're running him into the ground. Like you said, I mean, that's where my concern is. It's not really about Kranick himself. It's more they're running this guy into the damn ground right now, when you have a guy like Stanek, who is probably the freshest arm in this pen right now, because I feel like he's been used the least out of everyone else in the bullpen. You have Budo, who could go multiple innings right now. Brazaban's shown he could give multiple innings. Why are you forcing yourself to use Kranick as much as you are? I think that it would be beneficial to let him get even today off if they could avoid him. I think that would be ideal, because you got to start giving him a little bit more rest, especially when, like I said, I mean, you have all these guys that could either go multiple innings or that have not been used as of lately. I mean, we rarely see Cabrera come out of the bullpen. Nunez first came back, like maybe use him a little bit more. Diaz was not used for like a week. Stanek has barely been used, like I mentioned. So I would just like to see them avoid using Kranick for a bit because the pitcher himself, again, is not what I'm concerned with because Kranick has showed he is a good arm for this bullpen. It's really the fact that I'm worried that they're going to run him into the ground so much to where we're having the conversation like last year, like you mentioned with Garrett, we talked about with Budo multiple times, where it just looked like these guys were overworked to the point where it started to ruin them. And then IL stints came about, and even Denzel Nunez, we saw it with him last year, but IL stints came about, and then these guys just didn't look as fresh at all. So I get that there's been injuries to the bullpen, so they want to rely on Kranick, but this is really the point that like Kranick getting 4 outs instead of 2 innings, depending on the matchup, playing 27 outs instead of innings when you have 3 long relief pieces in the pen. Exactly. Like I think a 4 out type of situation could be beneficial for him just to keep that arm fresh because there were times he was going like north of 30 pitches in his outings and we would see him get 1 day off and then come back out there. For most of these relievers, I mean, if Reed Garrett, we saw it earlier, Reed Garrett throws 12 pitches, we don't see him the next day. Reed Garrett, when he throws 20 pitches, we don't see him sometimes for 2 days. Edwin Diaz, they don't want to use him as much back-to-back days. And I just think Kranick should be getting that sort of treatment too, where, you know, if you're going to try to keep these guys fresh, I get it, but be more consistent with it because Jose Budo goes multiple innings and then he gets 2 days off and we don't see him the rest of a series. It's just a little bit weird in that regard that Kranick is the guy, especially with the fact that injury issues are the reason that he's not starting anymore. It's just very bizarre to me that they're not being a little more conservative with him, especially with how he's looked over the past few outings.
Yeah, 100%. And I even agree. I really agree with you in terms of the injury things. I mean, we've seen that, that injuries are one of the major reasons why Kranick is not really, a starter anymore. And considering that he missed basically all of last year due to injuries, like, I mean, to me, I find it bizarre why, like, Reed Garrett's getting so much time off, and then Diaz is getting so much time off, even though, we've seen Edwin Diaz over the past couple of years where, Diaz really works a lot better when he's pitching more and when he's, getting more volume in terms of outings. So, and then obviously, you mentioned with Budo, like where he'll go, two innings or more, but then he'll get a couple of days off. So it's really weird why they're choosing to run Kranick into the ground specifically. I don't know if it's just, they really trust him in that spot and per se, and, they just feel like he can go out there and, and give a lot of length. But as you mentioned, like, you can't keep on giving this guy, 30 pitch outings and then giving him a day off and then telling him to come back out and do it again. Like eventually his arm is going to run to the ground. And, we're starting to already see with the drop off where he's had it in his last couple of outings at the bullpen. But then, you could also point to the risk that, eventually they keep doing this. We're going to eventually see an IL spot. And with the Mets bullpen already being kind of stretched a little bit, and with guys like Hennessy Cabrera being in this bullpen, even though he's been a bit better as of late, you kind of don't want to, push your luck a little bit. Especially, I get it that Nunez has come back, and I mean, we're going to talk about it. I mean, with his last outing, especially, it's a bit better than his first outing in Arizona, but still a little bit shaky. It's just you want to be careful, especially with a guy like Kranick.
Yeah, and I want to correct myself because I don't know if I said innings by accident instead of outs, but yeah, I meant 4 outs if I said innings.
No, I'm pretty sure you said 4 outs.
Yeah, I mean either way though, yeah, it's like what Carson's saying: 4 outs, 3 long relief pieces equals 4 potential innings following a start that runs out of gas past 5. Exactly, like that's really what it comes down to. That limiting these guys to more of like 4 outs. Maybe if they're really dealing and get the first few easily, you can maybe push them a 5th out. But I just don't want to see them. Like, that's the thing. Like, Mendoza, I would thought, have learned his lesson, which it seems like we're talking about with Reed Garrett. He's a lot more careful. Denzel Nunez, he's being a lot more careful with him right now. But it just, I want to see the same philosophy applied with the rest of the bullpen because Brazoban has been just as effective as these guys right now. Max Kranick, before, these recent outings has been just as effective as those guys. And it's like you mentioned before, when Canning or Peterson could go to the bullpen, that will definitely help. But it's just something that I want to see change right now. It's just something that I want to see change. Corey retired. Sad when they go young like that. But yeah, it just something that I want to see change because I just worry about it considering how much it hurt this team down the stretch, especially when guys like Brooks Raley went down, which that was kind of like he was probably due just for Tommy John, but mostly like Nunez, where they ran him into the ground so much that he was not there for the playoffs. And then on top of that, Reed Garrett, you had half of him for the playoffs, and then Jose Butto is just not even reliable come playoff time with how much they utilized him down the stretch. So it's just something that is noteworthy that does need to change.
100%.
Yeah. In terms of just the starting pitching, though, did you want to break down Clay Holmes' outing? Talk about what you liked, what you didn't like from his outing, even though a lot of it was really good from what we saw, which is exciting yet again.
Yeah, I mean, I talked about it in the post game that we did for this game, and I think once again, I think Clay Holmes and we talked about it before the start of the season where we talked about it where you got to be patient with Clay Holmes. You're going to see improvement after each outing, and I know people didn't want to hear that. They wanted to see results right away, otherwise they wanted to put him back in the bullpen. But right now we're seeing one of the reasons why the Mets ultimately target him as a starter, and why we told you guys to be patient because Clay Holmes, he just along with the deep repertoire and the fact that he doesn't give up a lot of hard contact, and the fact that he has a lot of good swing and miss stuff still. I mean, Holmes is just showing you right again. I mean, like we talked about it before, but especially in the post game that we did. But Clay Holmes went very sinker reliant in his start, through the sinker about 51 times, which is something that we saw at the start of the year where he was pretty much more comfortable with only using that pitch instead of branching out to the rest of his repertoire. And that's something that we saw last year when he was a reliever with the Yankees. But the big difference, and I brought this up, between as of right now currently and the start of the season, Clay Holmes has really got his sinker command under control, and we're starting to get him see a lot more swings and miss on that. We're starting to see a lot more softer contact on that. So, and that's something that I really like to see because, like I said, through the sinker about 51 times, changeup 13 times, slider 10 times, the sweeper 10 times, and the four seamer only 6 times. And with the sinker, 20 swings, 5 whiffs, changeup 6 swings, 2 whiffs, slider 3 swings, 2 whiffs. So I think the biggest difference from at least the starts at the beginning of the season compared to now, I think we're starting to see the swing and miss stuff kind of go a little bit under the radar, because I think in this start specifically, and I remember the Washington start in general too, he got a lot of ground balls, not a lot of stuff in the air. And in fact, this was the first start where Clay Holmes actually gave up his first home run this season to Kyle Tucker, which was crazy considering that this is already his 8th start, and it took him till the 8th start to go up his first home run of the year. So Holmes has been just really good, and I think it's like what we were saying, you just got to be patient, and we're starting to see improvements after improvements with each start. And now he's starting to I think in the last 3 of his 4 starts in the last 3 of his 4 starts, he's gotten to a point where he's pitching 6 innings. Now, I think if he could take that next step, and you could start to see a couple of outings where he's starting to go 7 innings or maybe even 8 innings, I think, again, that's only going to help the bullpen in terms of, keeping them fresher. And once again, it's just the pitching lab, and we'll talk about it with Griffin Canning, but I think the fact that they're finding these type of guys, and just the little adjustments that they're making, and you're starting to see these guys on very valuable contracts now just going out there and providing really good value and really good length out of as being starters. I think once again you got to give major credit to Stearns and the pitching lab on that one.
Yeah, I just like that with Holmes' outing, just like you mentioned with the sinker usage, just the confidence that's coming back with it, because we also talked about early on, like despite him using the sinker a lot in some of those starts, he started to go away from it a little bit. And rightfully so, because early on, I think we talked about a lot how we thought it was his worst looking pitch out of everything he was throwing. And I'm glad that he's starting to like gain his confidence back with that, because now it's only going to make him more effective when he tunnels it with the four seam, and when he's mixing in a few changeups, sweepers, and sliders in there. So it's just good to see the improvement in the sinker and see him start to get more confident, generating swing and miss stuff, most importantly, because that was the other thing. I mean, he was not generating any swing and miss stuff really with the sinker early on, and it was getting beat pretty badly. So I was very happy and encouraged to see that. And in the rest of that game one, I mean, you saw Nunez come in. He didn't look sharp, but definitely better than his first outing. There will be improvements there. Reed Garrett only threw 2 pitches, so not a lot to dissect there. And then Jose Budo, the fact that Diaz even had to warm up in that first game was really annoying, because it's like you have a 7-2 lead and you're putting that many guys on that's what's happening. I said it when we were watching the game too. I'm like, if Jose Budo puts him in a spot to where Edwin Diaz has to come into the game, I want him DFA'd by the end of the night, because there was no way you could let it get to that situation. But thankfully, it did not. But yeah, most support with Clay Holmes. Good to see him have another good outing, going 6 innings too, which was really nice, because that's the other thing. They need to start getting 6 to 7 innings from these guys,
Yeah, 100%.
which unfortunately did not translate to Tyler McGill's outing, which we didn't watch much of it. We were busy, but yeah, not good. And it's just back to back starts now in May with Tyler McGill. Why is it? I just want to know what it is about the calendar flipping to May, where just like this guy all of a sudden loses his ability to pitch. The velocity was down on pretty much everything. The stuff just didn't look as good, and he had no command early on. Just a rough outing overall. Really rough outing.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm lost in terms of McGill, and this is one of the reasons why. Because I talked about this after when we did the series, talking about the national series, and I talked about how in that third game of the series where McGill started, I said that was arguably McGill's best start I've ever seen in the major leagues, just in terms of command, swing and miss stuff, and the fact that he went deep into that game, going 6 innings and pitching into the seventh inning. But and I talked about it where I was close on McGill. And completely buying in, but I said I need to see it beyond April, because we all know once the calendar turns to May, for some reason McGill just he folds and he shrinks, and I don't know if this is a confidence thing. I don't know if it's a pressure thing. I have no idea, but it's like it's the same story written year after year after year, and it's really frustrating with McGill, right? Because I think we all know that the stuff is there. I think we all know it because we see how good he is in March and April, but for some reason it's like, and again, like didn't have command early with his fastball. Sinker wasn't there. The slider, which we talked about at the start of the year, which was one of the main reasons why McGill was really effective at the start of the year, because he finally had that secondary breaking ball pitch that could get him through games if his fastball and sinker weren't great. And again, he didn't have complete command of that. Only threw that pitch about 33% in the zone. So it's just, I don't know what it is with McGill. I'm really lost, but it's overall frustrating because, I mean, I get that the offense wasn't great in that game either, but when you put your team down in the hole early 4-0, especially against a Cubs team like that, it's tough. And I get it. He kind of rebounded a little bit later in the game and was able, I think, to get through the fifth inning, and then the Mets pulled him after that. But it's just like it's like I've been saying, it's like you've been saying. It's really frustrating why every season it turns to May, the calendar, and we see this version of McGill.
Yeah, and just the amount of hard contact he was allowing too was really, really concerning. I do want to see actually how many I mean, yeah, just like looking at it, so much hard contact off of him. It's just not good. It's just I'm so exhausted of having this conversation every single year. And it's annoying because I'm an asshole. I came on the podcast after his last start in May or in April rather, and I said that I was in. I said the words that I was in, and it just of course this freaking happens to follow up. It's so exhausting though. It really is, and I don't get it anymore. I really just don't. If he has another rough start, like if his next start's rough, I'm back out. Like I'm back out until he ropes me back in, which he inevitably will with a couple of weird starts in September when we counted him out. We said we want him in the bullpen, and then he'll come back out of nowhere in September and have a few good starts, and we're going to be roped back in. But I really just can't understand why it is this way with him. I really don't get it. I mean, he did have a good amount of whiffs, but when he was not generating the whiffs, it was because he was leaving so much over the plate, and it was because he was allowing so much hard contact that it was really just concerning.
Yeah, I don't get it. I mean, it's like I get we talk about it and we say that McGill at the start of the year he was quote unquote the ace that was always here, but we never knew it. It's the fact that like I don't even need ace stuff from Tyler McGill. It's like just give me solid 4 or 5 depth stuff, and even then it's like he gets you overexcited like you said with the start of the year, and it's looking like he's taking the next big step, and then like you said when the calendar turns to May, it's like he barely looks like a sixth starter and a bullpen type pitcher. And like I said, I don't know if this is a confidence issue. I'm not sure if it's just he's exhausted because he was overdoing it in his first couple starts of the season. Like I don't know what it is. It's frustrating because as I said, it looks like he's taking those next steps and he's finally putting everything together, and then everything falls apart. And I'm not sure what they do. I mean, I guess we'll see. Over the next couple of weeks with how he does with this next couple starts, and then with the fact with Manai coming back, with Montas coming back,
He's gonna
it's
have to
gonna be
rebound.
yeah, it's gonna be interesting. It's gonna be an interesting debate because it's either he's going to rebound and keep his spot in the rotation, and obviously we'll talk about it with Griffin Canning because Griffin Canning right now is making a case for why he should keep his rotation spot. So he's either gonna rebound, put his name in the conversation for why he should keep his spot, or he's going to keep flustering, falling apart, and then he's either going to end up finding his way into the bullpen or down in AAA again. So we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. Even though we brought up Canning and Peterson, I mean, McGill, he's entering the conversation, potentially going to the bullpen, which we've talked about at times that he might be better suited for the bullpen, like we've said with Canning and like we've said even with Peterson. But for right now, it's just like next start he has to rebound. He just has to rebound because it's getting to the point where these guys are going to come back and you got to win your spot, man. You have to win your spot. It really comes down to that. The only good news from that game, though, outside of Beatty getting a couple home runs, which then he was off the next day, which caused Met fans to be in an uproar. But either way, Edwin Diaz has looked so much better. All of a sudden, though, now we could use him when they're down by 1 run. Like that's all of a sudden okay now. But either way, he came into that spot, rightfully so, and he looked good. I mean, he is looking so much better. The velo is starting to be more consistent. He's starting to generate the swing and miss stuff more. I'm very pleased with what we've got from Edwin Diaz as of lately.
Yes, same with me, and even like Carson brought it up. Whenever we talk with him in the group chat or when he's discussed it on his podcast in Mets Weekly, which make sure you guys go check out Mets Weekly. They're going to have their stream today, I believe, at around 3:30, breaking down the Cubs series. So, and he's talked about it where with Diaz, it's really just about mixing the fastball and the slider properly because we've seen it like his slider has probably been the best pitch, the best pitch out of the two that he's had so far because he's had command issues with his four-seamer so far, especially at the start of the year in his first couple of outings. But really now that ever since he started to, evenly mix the two, the slider and the fastball, we start to see the command come back more. We start to see the velo come back more because in the second game of the series, In the first game of the series, he topped out at about 99 miles an hour on the fastball. And then the second game, he topped out at around 97.5 miles per hour. So it's good to see that both the velo and the velo and the controller coming back on those two pitches. And, now the fact that, if Diaz can continue this good stretch that he's on, and he's finally found that form per se, and we talked about it before with, the fact that the Mets were starting to, kind of over rely on guys like Kranick and guys like that. Now if you have Diaz, coming back to form, now you finally have, again, that guy at the back end of the rotation, which you trust, to which you can put in those high leverage situations or, those high leverage closing situations. So the fact that, you don't have to over rely on guys like Stanek or Kranick, late in games, or even Jose Budo per se. So, and Brazaban as well, which we've seen him be used late in games, to come out of tough situations. So I think it's a good sign that we're starting to see the Edwin Diaz of old, and hopefully he can just continue this good stretch that he's on.
Speaking of good stretches continuing, Griffin Canning, really freaking good start. 6 innings, 2 hits against, 1 earned run, 1 walk, 5 strikeouts. It's getting to a point where I don't know how you move him to the bullpen anymore when the rotation gets healthy, which obviously there's going to be only one guy that gets moved, because you have to imagine they're going to want to go to that 6-man rotation that has been discussed heavily once Montas and Manaea are back, and then one of the guys will go to the pen. Griffin Canning right now cannot be I don't think he could be moved. I mean, he was so freaking good. The swing and miss stuff yesterday was great. I mean, he started the game with how many consecutive strikeouts? Because there were 6 total in the game. No, it was 3, but it was 4 strikeouts in the first 5 batters he faced that he struck out. Yeah. I mean, just amazing to see again from Griffin Canning.
Yeah, he's really impressing me, and a part of it's because the 3 main pitches that he's using, and I know we talked about that. We would have liked to see him use the cutter a bit more, but I mean, we have to give credit where credit is due, because his main 3 pitch mix of a 4-seam, slider, and a changeup, I mean, for him, it's working right now, because, like you said, he's getting the swing and miss stuff. He's pretty much throwing everything in the zone at a consistent rate. And I know we talked about it before, where the fastball velo isn't really the strongest, but to give him credit, he's putting it in the right road. He's putting everything in the right location. He's getting good swing and miss stuff. I know he gave up the home run to Pete Crow Armstrong on a fastball up and in, so you would have liked to see a bit more of a better location there from him, but pretty much everything else was fine. And I mean, he kind of went back to what we were seeing before at the start of the year, where he kind of went more 4-seam heavy, threw that the most out of any pitch 38 times, slider 32 times, the changeup 17 times. And that changeup, especially last game, it was really good, because he was
like what D's commenting here. He said his fastball and changeup are tunneling, and 100%.
His changeup was very good. And I think probably the best changeup that he threw all day was, I forgot which inning it was. It might have been the 5th inning or the 4th inning, or maybe even the 3rd inning. One of those innings where he got into trouble, and he had Pete Crow Armstrong in a 2-2 count, and he got him in front of a changeup. So, I mean, even the numbers back it up. I mean, 11 swings, 5 whiffs on that changeup, 18 swings and five whiffs on the slider, and then 14 swings and 2 whiffs on the fastball. I mean, he's putting everything together. And look, I still kind of stand by the fact that I think his tools would work very well out of the pen. But as you mentioned, it's like he's getting to a point now, because I mean, this is his 8th start, and through 8 starts, he has a 2.36 ERA, which is just insane to hear, because if you compare Griffin Canning to the pitcher he was last year with the Angels, and then you compare him to what he is now with the Mets so far through 8 starts, I mean, it's two totally different pitchers. And again, you got to give credit to David Stearns and the pitching lab, because they found this guy. They signed him to a $4.5 million contract, and they made adjustments either to his repertoire or to how he releases pitches and how he throws them in general. But it's working, and as you said, like, he's making a name for himself, and he's gonna give Mendoza and Stearns a very hard decision to make when it comes time, to choose a guy out of the rotation as of right now to slot into that bullpen. And as you said right now, as of right now, and I guess, and look, things could change. Things could change, right? But as of right now, Canning 100% fully deserves his spot in the rotation.
Yeah, and I lost my train of thought here with what I was gonna say. I mean, yeah, he's getting good batters out as well. Like D is mentioning, his slider moves like a sinker. Now I remember what I was gonna say. There was someone on Twitter, because you were crediting the pitching lab. There was someone that was like, "It's not a pitching lab thing. He was just due for a breakout year." Then why'd the Braves let this guy go? Then why was there not a bidding war for Griffin Canning if the fix was so easy? I mean, that was the dumbest thing I think I've ever seen on Twitter, which says a lot, considering we're Ranger fans also. But yeah, I mean, he has just been unreal. And you were talking about the changeup. I forgot which batter it was where he just threw high heat to someone and jammed them. It was just beautiful to watch. I mean, like you said, the fastball location is just so good right now, and that's what's really helping save the fact that the shape isn't the best of it, and he doesn't have crazy velo on the fastball either. So it's just exciting to watch what he does every time he's out there right now. He has just been absolutely unbelievable. And yeah, I mean, if he's going to start giving 6 innings at the start, you can't take this guy out of the pen. To do it against this type of offense is what was really encouraging the most.
He's definitely right now on course for, if he keeps up this production. I mean, he's gonna get paid in the offseason, and I know the Mets aren't probably gonna do it because they'll probably just go out there and they'll
Find the
find
next
some other
guy.
guy to fix. And then, we'll redo this cycle all over again. And then, good luck to whichever team, probably overpays for Canning, which I wouldn't be surprised if the Angels end up doing it, because that's just something the Angels do. But I mean, look, more and more pitchers are now going to come are going to come here and are going to want to come here, because pitchers are going to see, and and players talk around the league. But if players start to see that a guy like Canny could come here and sign a cheap contract like that and make those kind of improvements and those kind of adjustments, and now he's pitching to those type of numbers, and he's going to get paid probably a lot of money if he continues up this production. I mean, it's only a good sign for this organization and this franchise as a whole, that now they're starting to finally become a destination for guys, like for pitchers. And we've seen this, with the Dodgers, with the Rays over the past couple of years, with the Braves. It's a very good sign for this franchise.
Yeah, especially when it is guys like Canning and Severino, who statistically put up like two of the worst seasons in baseball, coming here and doing what they have done. It's just the pitching lab does work. It is working numbers, or working wonders. Doing numbers, working wonders. I mean, same thing here. It's just unbelievable. But yeah, outside of that, some offensive things maybe need to improve still here and there. Runners in scoring position stuff. They didn't get a lot. There was a lot of solo home runs, but the offense was still definitely better in the series. We'll see how much it sustains. But yeah, I don't know if you have any other thoughts with the series, if you wanted to talk about the offense a bit or whatnot. But if not, we can move on and talk about the trade rumors and preview the series coming up.
No, I mean, it's pretty much, I think, what I brought up at the start of the podcast, and like what you just talked about as of right now. I mean, still, I would like to see improvements in terms of runners in scoring position. Like you also mentioned, a lot of solo home runs, which I would like to see, you know, guys like Juan Soto, whenever they come up with guys in scoring position where, he tanks a big time home run. And he had a couple opportunities in that second game, and he just couldn't come through. Obviously, because he's had eight home runs so far, and 7 of those 8 had been solo home runs. So you would like to start to see him, get those big time hits with runners in scoring position. And I get he kind of had, like I mentioned, he went 0 for 9 those last 2 games. Kind of did get unlucky a little bit. Had a couple hard contact outs. So, but like I mentioned, Soto's starting to look a bit better. As we mentioned with Pete, he has struggled a little bit, but I think he'll come around again. Lindor obviously continue with his hot stretch, especially with the home run he hit yesterday in the finale, giving the Mets a 3-2 lead. And then overall, I mean, just with the depth of the lineup, I mean, it's been a bit better. Obviously, Alvarez coming back has been huge. Would like to see the power be a bit better, but we know that Eric Chavez just wants him to hit ground balls and singles, which we're not really utilizing Alvi to the best of his potential. But he's been good in terms of what he's been doing. Luis Torrens also, with the fact that he came through with a big RBI with a big RBI triple, even though later in the game he'd get hitting the balls on a foul pitch, but thankfully he's fine. And then, yeah, I mean, just overall, I mean, I like to see that Beatty had 3 home runs in the series. He's looking better. McNeil had the home run. He also worked a really good at bat in the second game of the series before the Mets ended up losing that game. So overall, the lineup's looking a bit better, but as we've said, still want to see the lineup be a bit better in terms of bringing in guys when there's runners in scoring position.
Which, speaking of which, there was a trade rumor recently that the New York Mets could be adding to their offense, as there was a report that came out. I believe it was Bob Nightingale, which, make of that what you will to begin with. But apparently the New York Mets are interested in Luis Robert, and the White Sox really like Blade Tidwell as part of a potential return. I have mixed feelings. Luis Robert is definitely a polarizing player to talk about, because there's either fans that are like stroking it to get him right now, or there are fans that want absolutely nothing to do with this guy because they look at the fact that a guy like Tyrone Taylor offensively has outproduced him since 2023, or if you want to be technical, since the start of 2024, however you want to word it. Tyrone Taylor is statistically put up like better numbers than him, and even in the field. I will say this. To me, it really depends on what return the White Sox want. The thing that concerns me for sure about the idea of a Robert is a work ethic thing, because there is the fact that there is something to be said about how the work ethic isn't good. A lot of people look at it as, well, he's on the White Sox right now. If you put him in a better lineup, it will help him out and he'll be a lot better. But the problem also is, again, you need to have the work ethic. If the Mets with their pitching lab were just as effective with the hitting, I would say no brainer, bring in Luis Robert. So I'm somewhere in the middle where I don't hate the idea, but I'm also very skeptical of how it would work, because there's no doubt when Luis Robert is on. I mean, if you get the 2023 version of him where the exit velos are there and all that stuff, and then plus his glove in the field is still really freaking good, then yeah, I mean, that's a conversation that I'd entertain. But the problem is, over the past 2 years, you're looking at a guy that's been below average in every single aspect of the game, and the only thing he's good for right now is stolen bases. And they give up Blade Tidwell potentially for a guy that is effectively producing and playing like a fourth outfielder, that I don't love. It's just a really huge gamble that the Mets would be taking.
Yeah, I fully agree. Like Robert is definitely a polarizing figure, right? Because I think we all know that there is a talented player in there somewhere, and I get the argument that people are saying, oh, it's at the end of the day, he's on the White Sox. If he gets put into a better lineup, you'll see better numbers with him. He'll get better protection and stuff. He'll get more pitches to hit. But I mean, I see that argument, but at the end of the day, it's not an excuse for the reasons why he's putting up a 186 batting average as of right now, a 293 on base, and a 326 slugging percentage. Like that is not a good excuse. And again, I agree with you. It all depends on what the return is. Because I mean, I mean, Blade Tidwell is an interesting one. I mean, obviously he didn't look great in his first pitching outings in the major leagues. He's also struggled a little bit at AAA, but I think we all agree that there is a talented player in Blade Tidwell. So again, it all depends on what the overall package is going to be that you're going to send back to the White Sox. But I mean, like you said, if you're going to get the 2023 version of Luis Robert, where he was a 128 WRC plus player, he had an over 800 OPS, and he was also a 4.9 WAR player, basically a 5 WAR player. Like if that's the guy you're going to get, cool. Then I would probably trade Blake Tidwell. But if that's the guy you're going to get, if the guy that you're currently getting is the 2025 version, where he's batting under 200 and he's not getting on base, he's striking out a lot, he's not walking a ton, and pretty much you're only getting him for the stolen bases and the good defense, then it doesn't make sense to do that trade. Listen, if Stearns feels like there is something in Luis Robert which the Mets can unlock, and the the package to get him isn't a lot, then listen, cool, make the trade. I trust David Stearns if that's how he feels, but if the White Sox are going to be asking for a lot more than just Blake Tidwell, then I probably would stay away from this trade.
The only promising thing I could say is that, I mean, he is only 27 still, so there is still something to be said where, it's not impossible for him to get back to where he was. I just don't know. Like, for me, it's just the worry of the Mets have not shown that their hitting lab is as up to par with their pitching lab, which, we know part of the reason why that is the case. We won't get into it, but I'm just so on the fence about it. I mean, if they do it, I'm not going to be mad. I'm not going to be pumped. I'm going to be somewhere in the middle. Like, that's how I would put it, where I'm going to be neutral and I want to wait and see how it goes before I judge the trade. That's where I would be.
Yeah, I would definitely be like you said in the middle. I'd be cautiously optimistic just because like I said, I do think there is a player in there. And part of the reason is I trust Stearns. And listen, like I said, if he feels that there is a player in there, and if he feels that he could, and if he feels that the Mets could ultimately find something that could get Luis Robert back to anywhere near what he was in 2023, then cool. I'll be cautiously optimistic in the middle, as you mentioned. But we'll see what happens because I mean, like you said, it is at the end of the day, it is Bob Nightingale making that report. So, take that with a pinch of salt because we've seen Bob Nightingale be wrong a lot in the past. So, but we'll see. I mean, look, we're still 2.5 months away from the trade deadline. So I don't know if this is like a trade that could be done as of right now or in a couple weeks, or this is just more down the line towards the trade deadline. But we'll see. Like I said, for me, it all depends on what the return is. If they're asking for Blake Tidwell and more, then I would stay away from it. But if it's only Blake Tidwell and like maybe like a lower end prospect, something like that, then I mean we'll see. We'll see. Listen, like I said, if Stearns feels that there's something in there and they could get out of him, then cool. I'll trust him to make that trade.
Yeah, and with that being said, they have a series coming up against the Pirates, which will be very interesting to say the least. I'll have my thoughts on that series after I give you the pitching matchups. Paul Skeens versus David Peterson and Ace Off in game number one. Freaking Paul Skeens. That's going to be interesting to see against this offense. Kodai Senga versus Mitch Keller in game number two. And then in game three, Bailey Falter versus Clay Holmes. I'm going to be honest with you here. You better sweep this team. I'll pick them to sweep because you better. Like, this is a team that got their manager fired in May. You should absolutely be annihilating the shit out of this Pirates team. Their offense is not good at all. They do have, like I said, some good pitchers. You're only seeing one of those good pitchers, thankfully, because they're avoiding Heaney, who's off to a really good start, and they're avoiding Jared Jones, which is he hurt right now? I don't know if he's hurt or what,
I'm
but
not sure.
what?
I'm not sure if he's hurt.
Just because I feel like I haven't heard much about him this year. Yeah, I think he's injured right now because, yeah, he's injured. I was going to say, because I haven't heard anything about him this year. So, yeah, he's on the 60-day IL too with oh, yeah. Did not realize that he was getting Tommy John surgery. All right, cool. So that makes a lot of sense. Either way, though, you should be annihilating this Pirates team. Like, there is no excuse to not beat the ever living piss out of them. Their offense sucks. I get you're facing Paul Skeens, and the Mets offense has struggled, especially against elite pitching. Now is the time to show that you could actually hit off of some elite pitching and get to that Pirates bullpen in that first game. You should be able to win that. You got results men on the mound. And the next two games, I mean, you're facing Mitch Keller and Bailey Falter. If you don't beat up on those pitchers, then we got some serious conversations to have here.
So I agree with you. I think in reality, when you look at everything, I think that they should sweep. I think that they only take 2 out of 3, though. I think Paul Skeens goes out there today. I think he pitches very well. And I know the Pirates offense hasn't been great, but David Peterson has also not been great in his last 3 starts as well. So I think there is a potential just because, Skeens is going to do what Skeens does. He's going to go out there. He's going to pitch very well. He's going to give the Pirates some length. in a start, and I think Peterson has a chance to go out there and just not pitch well, and it could be one of those close games where the Mets ultimately lose 3-2 just because, or even 4-2 because they don't get good pitching out of Peterson, and Skeens just keeps the offense in check the whole game. But pretty much after that, considering when you look at the other two starts in Mitch Keller versus Senga, and then Bailey Falter versus Clay Holmes, I mean those are two games which you should be winning. So and again, the Pirates just fired their manager and Derek Shelton, and they did just take 2 out of 3 from the Braves. So thank you to the Pirates on that one. But I do think that they'll lose tonight, and then I think they win the second and third game to take the series 2-1.
And we do have the lineup for tonight's game that just dropped: Lindor, Soto, Alonso, Nimmo, Vientos, McNeil, um, Alvarez, Beatty, Acuna. So there you go. That's the offense that, or that's the offense, yeah, that will face Paul Skeens in this first game. So it'll be interesting to see. So we'll see what happens. But thank you everyone for tuning in and watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new to the channel. Turn on your notifications so you know when we upload or go live. I'll see you guys in the next one.